Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at Space Cowboy Books Online. I'm your host, Jean-Paul Garnier, and this evening for Flash Science Fiction Night, we have featured readers Eliane Boey, Suzan Palumbo, and Pedro Iniguez. We're going to start off the evening with a story from Eliane Boey. Eliane is a speculative fiction writer based in Singapore. She is the author of the techno thriller Club Candango and science fiction novella collection Other Minds. She has stories published in Clark's World, Weird Horror, and others. She will be reading an abridged version of Hems and Hexes, published in the anthology of Enchantment and Enigma and the Infinite by Stars and Sabers, which comes out today. And I will drop a link in the chat for that book. So here is Eliane Boey with Hems and Hexes.
Every lighted tailor knows that brocade curtains can only be unpicked with deconstruction spells. Unraveling curses would, in all other cases, be sufficient, but only brocade would do for his brilliance's ceremonial tent in progress. If I did not have half a squadron loitering behind me as I was trying to unpick said curtains, I wouldn't have rushed the cursed and gone at it with a seam ripper and a swifting chant when that failed, and pulled down the runner on the altar of incandescence in the process, resulting in me having to share a work table. All this because his brilliance's army was lost in the province of Uliao, no thanks to the geomancer, the learned Zhao Wei. 3 days ago, his brilliance was blocking the light from the doorway to the ceremonial tent in progress, which I've come to think of as my tent, seeing as I am the camp's only trailing tailor, and the tent requiring still more spell work to complete. The learned Zawe was speaking. Until the altar is repositioned facing west, and the trigrams on the hangings and runners reflect the reigns of the monarchs of the brilliance era, it would be inauspicious for your brilliance to enter Hingbo. His brilliance pressed the skin between his eyes. Of course, the altar is built into the central beam of the tent, and the hangings will take days to resew. To alter. My army has been stuck in Uliao for 7 days, and now everything hinges upon altar linen. Each day that passes, the court expects to hear deeper and deeper disgrace of my tour. Behind his brilliance stood the fourth addresser of the seal. By the way, the elderly man looked on the prince with unblinking eyes, chin tucked into the disapproving folds of his neck. It was clear her incandescence had been hearing of the prince's digressions ever since he'd caught him with hands sticky with sesame cakes before dinner. And technically, it was her army, and all the peninsula knew that she'd put the prince to this tour only to keep him busy with something that wasn't endless games of courtyards and cockroaches. And second, it's not linen, your brilliance, it's champagny silk, and I followed the pattern from the previous tour, which clashes with the killing stars of this tour, the geomancer interjected. She pulled a ridiculous coat of trigrams round herself, thankfully spotted when I heard your unfortunate tango from outside the tent. It wasn't quite as dramatic as sparks of hate at first sight, but it was close. I imagine a seam ripper and a quick affix chant would have sorted it in a half day, she said, not looking up. I lifted my chin at the geomancer. Tailoring, working fabric with light, doesn't belong to affixing and unfixing. It's construction. Garments or furnishings spun with light are carriers of protections, charms, curses. With construction, only spells will do. Okay, spell away then. I would, if not for this mess. What with your wheels and carts and compasses on my work table, and that thing you do with your hands, and must you shake that foot? She means my very existence. Forgives the intrusion, but it was his brilliance who placed me here to oversee your work. To work together, I hissed, and instantly regretted it. I ignored her, and tried once more with the deconstruction. It's a long spell, and I began with acknowledging that its current structure was artificial. It's a fusion of violence, and I will now separate it gently into its parts, but that its parts alone do not define it. And these parts and non-parts will once again encounter one another because the world exists in everything, and so on. You can see now why I couldn't very well carry on with the deconstruction spell with any amount of distraction, but I could feel her disdainful eye on me. I said, tailoring is proper magic. Geomancy is humbug and interior design. Geomancy is old as the reign of the first empress and is one of the 5 alleviated light reflectors of the empire. Tailoring is at best practical light spinning. I'm not listening. I could not possibly hear the sound of your breathing. I tried to return to the spell, but I had forgotten where I left it. Why were you skulking outside my tent anyway? It's not your tent, she said, and she dropped the fold of her cloak like boiling water. I can't work with her in the same tent and at the same table, no less. The under-functionary of logistics looked at me over the tops of his glasses. Chewy, you are a master probationer tailor. The learned geomancer is a master. Only for the lack of geomancers and for traditionalists who believe trickery for magic. His brilliance believes in geomancy. Zhao Wei is a distraction. The under-functionary shrugged. Men and women both have found it impossible to concentrate on their tasks in the company of His Brilliance's geomancer. It was pointless to continue in the face of the under-functionary's indulgent nods and benevolent smiles. True, Zhao Wei was tall with cheekbones that most people find attractive and arched dark eyebrows and smoky eyes that those same people would not disapprove of. But that proved no point, really. There was a card on my table when I sat down the next morning. Shake the cup and take a stick. Looked around. 2 types of fabric, spools of thread, and my heavily dog-eared spell notes from Imperials, and a bamboo cup with what looked like fortune sticks. Across the table, Zhao Wei pushed up her sleeves. Geomancy stuff and nonsense. But I shook the cup, drew a stick, and read it aloud. If you could only watch one play for the rest of your life, what would it be? Phoenix and Cowherd, we both said. I laughed. Please, you can't be old enough to have watched it. I'm Phoenix and Cowherd generation. When you grow up near Last Stand Marsh, all the plays are new for 5 years, or until the mayor's son makes a contribution to the local theatre. You're from Guati? I had you from Fukui with your airs. The geomancer snorted. Flatter me again and I'll claim more than half the table. Take another stick. I whispered the deconstruction spell over the altar runner. You are a whole of symbiotic parts that have never stopped becoming. You are always becoming. Now, interrogate your separateness. The runner glowed, and threads stood out at the joints, and slowly they lifted away from each other. One more stick. Not now. Separateness is not otherness. The thread stopped moving. Zhao Wei shook the cup once more. You want to? Separate your lack of fun from your personality. Dullness does not become you. The runner was no longer glowing. I threw my hands in the air. Might as well pick a stick. You ought to stop pulling at the lapel of your cloak or stretch, or you look even more ridiculous. Zhao Wei smirked. If you'd opened with that from day one, you'd be rid of me sooner. I tried to pick apart the strands of the spell in my head, but it was useless. You started this game just to talk to me? It wasn't just any bush, Zhao Wei sulked. Without a cloak, she looked just like any other camp follower. Only taller, with silkier black hair cascading down the sides of a strategically teased top knot, with narrower chin, firmer lips. You get the picture. Disgusting. I run a hand over the cloak. Interrogate yourself. The cloak shifted. It shimmered a little as it did, which was more due to it being velveteen, which is not real velvet, not demure, than its light. It revealed a tear where a set of trigrams was, effectively ripping them in half. You couldn't have just taken a cue stick and waited your turn for a mending? I couldn't risk his brilliance knowing the cloak was that important to me. We all have our crutches. I stroked my lucky scissors. Well, I'm sure it was the baddest bush. A hawthorn. Ah, love the berries, hate the claws, right? I was thinking, hawthorn juice, hawthorn fruit leather, didn't notice the rip until after, and nothing's been the same ever since. I flexed my fingers and ran them over the tear, eyes at the level of the fabric. It smelled of rosewood under warm hands and red date tea. Damn it, smelled of her. It's a clean rip, simple patch might do it. Zhao Wei's eyes narrowed. But I'll cast an inseparability in flux to make the patch extra tight because I have standards, but on one condition. Name it. You tell His Brilliance that the flying cowherd and the dancing spiders are in alignment and we move on to Hyungpo, because I've had it sitting on my arse in Uliao. Fix the cloak and I'll have His Brilliance in armor and on the road in seconds. Was it 2 or 3 seconds later that I realized it will move her on from my tent as well. Thus, in no time and with much haste to make up for all the idling, that is to say, in 2.5 days, the army was on the move again. The soldiers were pleased with the exercise for half a day before they complained again over the dinner campfires that soldiering was a tough job and they wouldn't have gotten into it as their first brothers had inherited the family business. His brilliance was relieved because he could dispatch his mother's spy back to her with news of the triumphant continuation of the tour into Hyungpo. Zhao Wei was satisfied with a cloak mended with the spell work and the light restoration charm befitting his brilliance's learned geomancer. I didn't tell her I whispered a humility spell over the bottom hem, just in case. I found a half table to be more than sufficient for stitches and spell work, and the learned geomancer's continued company at the bench whenever the army stopped to set up camp to be not intolerable. Modified somewhat by a steady supply of hawthorn berry leather new games, although I must confess, I much prefer the old courtyard and cockroaches campaign to her quizzes. I'm just waiting for the right time to tell her. Perhaps when the cantering colostrum and the reluctant beetle are in alignment. The end.
Thank you so much, Eliane. Next up, we have Suzan Palumbo. Suzan is a Nebula World Fantasy and Aurora nominated Trinidadian Canadian speculative fiction writer and editor. Her short story collection, Skin Thief Stories, was published in 2023 by Neon Hemlock. Her Nebula nominated novella, Countess, was published in 2024 by ECW Press. It is available wherever fabulous books are sold. She is also the co-founder of the Ignite Awards and a goth. She's going to be sharing a story with us entitled Personal Rakshashi.
Hello. Yeah, this is from the collection Skin Thief last year. I just want to say before I read, there's some trigger warnings for mental illness. I'm a goth, so I don't write anything very happy. I'm sorry, maybe Pedro will bring up the mood after. Okay, here we go. Priya's drawing lotuses with chalk on the driveway. Unhappy with each blossom's symmetry, when a shadow lurks across her designs. She digs her nails into her palms, fists set to clobber her older brother, Videsh, who's probably come to drag his heels across her picture again. But when Priya stands to confront Videsh, he isn't there. She decides to trace the undulating shadow on the blacktop in yellow chalk. Its bulk encompasses her flowers, and, as she closes the shape, a spot begins to ripple at its center. The blot has depth. It's darker than any other part of the driveway. She watches, wide-eyed, as it devours her lotus petals. One by one, each flower vanishes into the asphalt abyss. When the mouth oozes towards her, Priya drops the stub of chalk and bolts screaming into the house. It's just your imagination, Pri, her father soothes. There are no Rakshasis now. Even if there were, she wouldn't live in our driveway. Priya promises herself that night never to mention the creature again. She's sitting on her bed, tears soaking the pages of her sketch pad. She hasn't been invited to Emily's pool party, the social event of 10th grade. It's because you're hideous and awkward, a disembodied voice rasps from underneath her bed. She tries to push the words from her head, but they stain her dreams, their bitterness coating her tongue when she wakes. What's it like to be a social outcast? Her brother says in the upstairs hall. His laugh is clipped, ape-like. Shut up, loser, she responds, though what she wants to say is, it's lonely. I don't fit anywhere, and I hate myself. Their father makes Videsh leave for school with her that morning. He dawdles a few feet behind, pretending he doesn't know who Priya is. Freak! Someone calls as they cross onto school property. Say that to my face, Videsh shouts. Priya doesn't look back to see the fight. Why do you have to move hours away to study art? Their father's voice is suddenly calm after an hour of circuitous arguing. I need to get away, Dad. Not from you guys, just to find out who I am. What do you mean, find out who you are? You're Priya. She should go, Videsh cuts in. Why is that? Their father's jaw clenches like a nutcracker as he leans back into the armchair. She's kind of good at this art stuff. Spends all of her time in her room anyways. What's gonna happen to her alone in her dorm? Huh. Their father laughs. I'll think about it. He stands and climbs the stairs to his bedroom. Priya opens her mouth to thank Videsh. I'm gonna set up a triple monitor and play Red Dead in your room, he says, before he slips off into the kitchen. The Rakshasi materializes a month into fall semester. You look delicious, she growls at Priya, brandishing her incisors in a wet, lurid smile. Priya looks at the other students bantering between sips of pumpkin spice latte in the concourse. No one else has registered the 10-foot colossus looming over her. She collects her sketch pads and pencils and marches straight to her dorm. You don't belong here, the monster repeats every night for the next week. Priya fills an entire book with studies of the giant's face. The Rakshasi's eyes are textured whirlpools of thick cadmium red and sidewalk chalk yellow. They bore deep into Priya's chest, leaving an aching internal wound. Why are you doing this to me? She asks the Rakshasi, teetering on the edge of exhaustion. The Rakshasi lowers her bulbous head so close to Priya's face, her hot breath condenses on her cheeks. I'm helping you suffer for your art. The Rakshasi's roar rattles Priya's ribs and vibrates her organs, unbalancing her from the inside out in the Greyhound bus cabin. Let me swallow you. The Rakshasi sneers. No one will notice. Priya tenses her entire body, doesn't flinch, and even as tears drip down her face. She leaves the overhead reading lamp on well after they've reached the lighted outskirts of the city and the Rakshasi has recoiled across the aisle. The giant, she's learned, is stronger in the dark. Videsh is waiting for her at the passenger pickup. She tosses her bag back into the seat of the beat-up minivan. The Rakshasi forces herself inside before Priya slides the door closed. Hey, loser! Videsh's greeting hangs in the air as Priya flops into the passenger seat and massages her temples. Are you okay? Say you're fine. The monster cackles from the shadows behind them. The words bloom on Priya's lips. She bites them back before she can steal her breath. No, she exhales. I'm not. She casts her eyes downward, anticipating one of his rapid-fire barbs. Videsh is sitting silently when she gains the courage to look at him. He puts his hand on her shoulder. Okay, Pri, he says. He's quiet as they leave the parking lot. The Rakshasi rages, battering the back of the seat, screaming in a frequency only Priya can hear. Priya buries her nails deep into her seat cushion. They pull up to the house, the windows aglow with lights for Diwali. Priya climbs out of the car, stands on the blacktop. The Rakshasi lumbers out of the back and towers behind her, occupying the space above the long banished lotuses. Priya remembers the morning she drew them, her hands steady and her strokes fluid. It was the last time she could distinguish where her thoughts began and the Rakshasi's ended. You're nothing without me, the monster snarls. Its glare is intimate, penetrating. It'll be there every time Priya picks up a pencil. She doesn't run. Instead, she turns and invites the Rakshasi inside the house. Tonight, she'll introduce the giant to her family. The end.
Thank you so much, Susan. Next up, we have Pedro Iniguez. Pedro is a Mexican-American Bram Stoker award-winning science fiction and horror writer from Los Angeles, California. He is the author of Mexicans on the Moon, speculative poetry from a possible future, Fever Dreams of a Parasite, and Echoes and Embers, speculative stories, among others. His debut picture book, The Fib, is due for release in October. Apart from leading writing workshops and speaking at several colleges, he has also been a sensitivity reader and has ghostwritten for award-winning apps and online clients. He's going to be sharing a story with us called The Sandbox.
The Sandbox. Deacon squinted, looking past the sand dunes. He'd seen the ocean before, but never one of endless sand. The heat rose into distance, mangling the air into contorted waves. Just over the horizon of endless dust lay the border. They'd never been this far before, and he couldn't help but feel nervous. He kept his revolver in one hand and a battered teddy bear in the other. One could never be too sure what was out there. In the sky, broken remnants of ancient starships hung in orbit just under the glaring sun, vestiges of their battle with space invaders the previous week. Behind him, the squeak of rusted wheels approached. Hidalgo pulled up beside him, hauling the dilapidated red wagon. "What's beyond the border?" Deacon said, his voice cracking. The last word sounded shrill, like when you squeezed an old dog toy in your hand. He was surprised the noise came out of him, and he hoped Hidalgo hadn't noticed. "That's the end of the sandbox, amigo," Hidalgo said, seemingly ignoring Deacon's gaffe. He nodded to himself in awe while gazing at the desert. "Looks like we've made it to the end." "What do you think is out there? Bandits? Robots? More monsters?" "I don't really know, Deke. I heard it's something worse. Much worse." "Worse?" Deacon asked, stroking the newfound hairs on his chin. He didn't remember those being there last week. He couldn't wait to get home and stand in front of his mirror to get a look. It had been a while since he'd been home. He couldn't even remember how long it had been since the last sight of Mama or one of the beef stews steaming in the pot. They say the elders live there. People say they have the answers to all of life's riddles. All we have to do is go over there and show them our respects. "You don't say," Deacon said. "Yes, sir. Always have to respect the elders. Also heard the wickedest thug in the West lives there. The one they call Responsibility." Deacon squeezed the teddy bear against his torso. The gash in the bear's side sped out a clump of cotton entrails. All three of them had been through a lot of action, but Deacon wasn't sure how much longer the game would last. Soon, summer would be coming to a close. After that, the future seemed cloudy. "I don't want to deal with no responsibility." "I'm afraid we have to," Hidalgo said, taking a breath and tipping the rim of his hat. "We all got to deal with responsibility at some point." "That's what my father used to say. Nowhere else to go but forward." Deacon pursed his lips. Hidalgo was right. All these years trekking through the sandbox had gotten stale. They had already done it. They had already done it all. They had discovered all the treasures there were to find, hunted down every boogeyman that roamed the highways, giggled at every dirty joke they'd heard. All that was left was a world beyond the box, and it scared them both. But they had each other, and they'd never let the other one down. Deacon propped the teddy bear on the wagon and snapped open his pistol cylinder. Counting with the fingers on his hand, he noted how many caps remained inside the plastic chambers. 4, he whispered to himself and nodded. "Okay, let's do this," he said. Hidalgo smiled and hoisted the red wagon's handle. Together, smiling, they crossed the border into the unknown. The end.
Thank you so much, Pedro. That was Pedro Iniguez with The Sandbox. Before that, you heard Suzan Palumbo with Personal Rakshasi. And opening the program was Eliane Boey with Hems and Hexes. Thank you so much to our featured readers tonight. Thank you for our audience for being here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find links to everyone's websites and books down below the video. Please join us for the next and last Flash Science Fiction Night of the season, which will be coming up on September 9th with featured readers Eugen Bacon, F.J. Bergman, and Tara Campbell. So bound to be another night of wonderful stories. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here, and we hope to see you next time.